Hi, everyone. Nice to see you. Welcome to McDougall's Medicine with Dr. John and Mary McDougall. I'm their daughter and your host, Heather McDougall. Tonight, we're just going to get into general questions just because I have so many questions that are emailed to me and the questions that we can never get to in chat. So I thought it would be fun just to do general questions as we usually do. Hi, Mom and Dad, Dr. McDougall and Mary. How are you?
Well, hello. I had some other plans, but go ahead.
Oh, okay, sure. What is that?
It's fine. I just, we were at your brother's house last night for dinner, and most folks know because I talk about Craig a lot. He's a professor, a medical doctor and professor at Oregon Health and Science University, and he's worked with me for a long time. Actually wrote some of the dietary guidelines for Kaiser Medical Center, and so he's been very much involved in taking care of patients by this means, and worked with Kaiser, wrote some really important stuff for the Kaiser system. And we were talking, and he's gone through some areas of frustration, and I understand that. But we've been talking about patients and how to get them to respond and so on. And one thing he said to me, he said, Dan, it's really hard to get people to do this. And my contention was, well, even if we can only get a few people to do this, it's worth the trouble because, there's nothing else that works. And I said, I really don't believe it. I said, when people ask me who does the program, it's people who understand, and sometimes it takes a lot of lessons. And of course, that's why we do the 5 o'clock sessions on Sunday night, and that's why we put on lectures like we did yesterday. We had a great lecture on fats that lasted about 4.5 hours. And so there's a lot of education. And of course, the ultimate education is our 12-day internet-based program, and books and all kinds of things we've done. And I said the other criterion that people have to follow the program is they have to like themselves. And that's a tough thing to do, except, I think by and large, most people enjoy life. They love their families. They have, wonderful jobs, most people, and they've done things like quit smoking, wear their safety belts and so on. And then they find out that they really don't have to be ill. Anyway, he expressed to me that he would like to find some better ways to help people change, to get more involved. I think that he would really like to do more of this kind of medicine because even though he's involved in a lot of administrative work and sees, patients on a regular basis, some pretty much closed out practice, he really enjoyed taking care of people the way that we do. In other words, it's fun to see people get well, to get their health back, to get off medications, to get out of major surgeries, and it's very rewarding. But I do understand, and maybe some of the questions we can get fed by our audience is some of the actually answers. I have the question: how do we get people to make these changes besides presenting the information in a very palatable way and encouraging people every step of the way? I'd like to, because I'm sure you're frustrated out there, and I'm sure a lot of you folks have tried to help friends and relatives because you've got your health back by doing some simple things like we recommend.
I think he made a good point, though.
What's that?
Because he was talking last night about how, you said, well, we have, such a great success in our program. Everybody does it. And he made a point of saying, well, it's sort of self-selective because people, when they come to see us or go through our program or even go online or come to these 5 o'clock sessions, they've already decided that they're either, we're the last place in town, or they've decided that, they have to do something to take care of themselves, or they want to do something. So we're sort of self-selective.
Yeah, but how did they get to us?
Well,
how did that self-selection process happen? I bet they had lots of experiences, both positive experiences, those that have friends who have good habits, exercise, don't smoke, eat well, and so on.
But see, I think he made a good point because he said, how do you get, when people just come into the office and it's just the general population, how do you get people to make the choice to be healthy if they've never heard about this before?
Well, I guess I'm an optimist because I look at everybody as a great potential to listen to our message and to get it right. And, it's not highly successful people in terms of very wealthy people or people who have big businesses or our professors at universities. Not necessarily that. I mean, I have people who have a limited amount of opportunities in life, and they just have to care about themselves, Mary. I guess it kind of like.
But it's still the question is, how'd they find out about it?
We just got to keep being as noisy as we can be.
Yes.
And I want you to know that we've known this we wrote this book right here. Show you the back cover.
That's the back cover.
That's the
Who
back
wants to
cover.
see that?
Okay, I don't want to tell them what the title is.
Oh, okay.
We wrote this book in 1979, and I finished my
Well,
internal
now
medicine.
show them this part so they can see it's not really a book. See?
Well,
it's
what's a book?
it's a book.
It's a book. We wrote it in 1979. I'd only been out of my medical residency for 2 years. I've been in practice for 2 years, and Mary and I put this book together. And the reason it's a ring notebook is because we had to add the recipes, and we had a mimeograph machine. Didn't we have a mimeograph machine back then? You guys probably don't know what that is. So at least a lot of you don't. It was a real burden to make copies. And we made copies and we'd hand them out to people, and we'd give them or sell them this book. And
Well, you know why we made it this size? Because this is half of the size of a 8.5 by 11. Then we can cut the recipes in half.
All right. Well, we started out. My point is we started out understanding there's not a question as to whether or not our approach works. It basically always works. The question is, can you get people to do it? And maybe you have some thoughts, and maybe you can call in or type in and tell us some thoughts that you have about, I don't know, how do we get more people to make this change? And certainly they're very needy. And if it doesn't happen this time, next Sunday night, maybe we can do it. But I want you to know that we understood that this was the problem. And the title of the book, it's not Heal and Stay Healthier, or Get Rid of Your Heart Disease, or Throw Your Pills, or whatever. It's making the change. So we knew.
So it actually says Heal and Stay Healthy on the front.
Yeah.
But it's the main title.
Change. And it also says something to the effect that you can learn to like foods that support good health. This is a great book. And you can learn to like food which supports your health.
All right, let's see, when was it done?
79.
1979.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's been almost, let's see, that would be 43 years we've been doing this. And nothing's basically changed. Now, if you could get a hold of a copy of this book, you'd have to go to a really used bookstore to get. Well, we sold thousands of these copies. Anyway, that's why I just want.
Not through a publishing company.
No, we sold them out of our office. And then we went on to write some national best-selling books. We were on the New York Times national best-selling list with the McDougall plan. And after I got off of Larry King's show one night, it was a very exciting night, to say the least. We were on the New York Times national best-selling list for at least a couple of weeks. So anyway, that was a little frustration last night I wanted to share with you. And I'm certainly still looking for the answer. And we've tried different ways. We've written books. We had weekend seminars. We've taken people on adventure trips all over North and South America. We've really tried. We have had residential programs, hospital-based programs, the 12-day program we're doing now over the internet, and we're doing weekends, and it's an ongoing effort. But there's great reward in it. We just stopped a long time ago. Believe me, there are easier ways to make money than to do what we do. But the rewards are so tremendous when you get somebody to buy into this and to make the change, And I would encourage all of you to take that same attitude, because if you get your friend or your relative to make the change, they'll always credit you for it. They probably don't even care who McDougall is. They'll look to you and they'll say, you saved my life. You got me off the pills, off the surgery, and so on. That's all I wanted to say, Heather. It was a great evening last night, but it often comes back to this conversation.
How do you get people to change?
Another conversation
I've
had with some of my colleagues, doctors, is because they know this is absolutely true. They know it's true, not only the dietary part, but the shortcomings of modern medicine. They know, and they're afraid. They're afraid to teach this kind of message because it's different than what everybody else does. And you have to practice by the community standard of practice. In other words, you have to kill people just like the guy down the street kills patients. If you do that, you want to
put it quite so bluntly, please.
Basically, it comes down to that. So you really, if you step out of line, and I've run into dozens of my colleagues who said, "Boy, I really like to do what you do, but I'm afraid. I'm afraid that I'll get sued. I'm afraid I'll get criticized by the people that work with me at the hospitals and so on." Good thing I never learned being afraid. All right, Heather, your turn. You can go ahead and ask questions. I just want to bring out some thoughts.
Well, no, I'm glad you brought that up. I mean, that's really the $1,000,000 question is, how do you get people to do this?
Yeah.
We have such a great program, but it's difficult to sell. And I think just part of it is because it's so unbelievable. Like, you really want me just to eat potatoes and vegetables and fruits, eliminate animal products and free oils, and I'll get well? Really? That's it?
Or it's so unbelievable. If it was believable, why doesn't everybody else do this?
Yeah.
Or why doesn't my insurance company pay for this kind of care? But they're starting to. There's a big change out there in medicine where insurance companies do realize that they're losing tons of money by paying for things that don't work and are very expensive. Like these drugs they're advertising. It used to be, drugs were like $10 for 90 pills at Walmart, or maybe $30 or $40 if you got the brand name. But now you're talking about medication that costs you, $2,000 to $70,000 a year just for the medication. Anyway, so we had a great time yesterday. I just want to tell people we did a second part of our series, which was on fats, and there was actually one question I might get to that came up yesterday. I gave a pretty good answer, but I thought about it. You guys teach me a lot. And when I get stumped on something, I don't give the kind of answer that I should be giving. And I recognize that I didn't give you the answer that I should have given you.
And then he goes back and spends a couple hours doing more research so that he can, next time he's on, he can tell you what he discovered after listening to that question.
Or I think about it a lot. Just like I'll tell you the question, maybe if we get to it later, I'll answer it. But the question is the low carbers are now saying that their diet is the best diet for satisfying your appetite. Remember that question, Heather?
I do, yeah.
So something to the effect is, look, they criticize a high carbohydrate diet and think you ought to go on a low carb diet because it satisfies your appetite. We'll get to that. Maybe we'll answer that before the 6 o'clock.
How it could.
Well, I'll tell you how it could.
Okay.
I kind of gave the answer yesterday, but I stumbled a lot, let me tell you. And I don't like it when I stumble a lot.
Well, you have our interest. I want to know the answer. I mean, it was about how that protein was satiating, and we were talking about how much more satiating the potato was.
Right.
But
tell me
more.
Right. Susan Holt, I gave the reference. If you want to look it up she did a lot of work on satiety. And if you have the book, the McDougall Program for Maximum Weight Loss, I have a whole chapter on that, and it goes through the scientific references. So it kind of stumped me, and I thought, well, okay, protein is satisfying. I've read someplace that it is a bit satisfying, but I couldn't think about it. I think I got it confused with when when Shirley Sweeney fed different diets to his medical students. When he fed a diet of sugar, the blood sugars were perfectly normal. Well, when he fed a diet that was very high in protein, they were also pretty darn normal. It was when they fed the diet that was really high in fat that every one of his students became diabetic. So I think I kind of confused that part. I'll have to do a little more research on it. But the answer is this, is the way that you satisfy your appetite on the low carb diet. And I finally stumbled around and got to this answer for our group yesterday. The way you satisfy your appetite on a low carb diet is you go into ketosis, and they don't even blink about calling their diets keto diets. But nobody stops to ask.
The title of books.
Oh yeah, the keto diet, and which is basically what Atkins taught, which Barry Sears taught, and Perlmutter teaches, and all kinds of many of the popular books are essentially keto diets. But people need to stop and ask what the word keto means. Keto refers to a state of ketosis. And ketosis occurs naturally under two circumstances, which, it gets rid of your appetite. When you go into ketosis, you suppress your appetite. Okay, it occurs naturally and to your benefit under two circumstances. One is if you're starving to death. Now, the first 3 days, it's extremely painful to not be without food. It's a great lesson if you want to have lessons in life, is just don't eat for a weekend. And that's all you think about is food. And then, by the third or fourth day, you go into ketosis and your appetite is suppressed. And then you don't think about food all the time. You start thinking about how to get out of trouble. How am I going to solve this before I starve to death in about 60 days? It takes about 60 days on average for people to starve to death.
Well, I think people can relate to this if you just say, well, the last time you were sick, really, you had the flu or you had a bad cold or really were not feeling well, you didn't feel like eating.
No, you went into ketosis.
You just wanted to get better. You didn't feel like eating food. So that's ketosis.
Yeah, that's ketosis. Yeah, if you're like have a bad flu, and like Mary said, 3 or 4 days later, you lose your appetite, or you lose it, in the early course of the flu. Again, because the body needs to be recuperating, not gathering and preparing food. That's why you go into ketosis. Well, ketosis occurs under these biochemical conditions. Your body loves to burn sugar. You learned about glycolysis, which is burning glucose. That's how most cells in the body function, is by burning glucose. The body even stores a couple of pounds of glucose as a reserve in the liver and the muscles in the form of glycogen. All right, so what happens is your body will resort to those glycogen stores. And by the way, you lose glycogen, 2 pounds of glycogen the first few days. And along with that 2 pounds of glycogen is 4 pounds of water. So one of the things that people who go on these low carb diets, the keto diets, brag about is, boy, I lost 6, 8, 10 pounds within just a few days. Well, that's water loss. That's what happens. Well, once you've burned up all the sugar that you store, then the body has to find some other source of energy, and it has to resort to your body fat. And when it burns fat, the byproduct is ketones, like acetone. That's the best I can have you relate to. It's like acetone. And the thing about ketosis is it suppresses the appetite. So yes, they're very good at suppressing their appetite. They call it satisfying their appetite. I call it, they're very good at making you sick and your appetite goes away. Now we have a whole other approach. Yes, your hunger comes back, usually in about 3 or 4 hours with our approach, but you satisfy, you feel good. You're healthier. It's what you're supposed to do. So, I can't argue with, in fact, if you can think of another explanation, I'd like to hear it. I can't argue about the intensity of losing your appetite on keto diets. Yes, but you have to make yourself ill. And because you're sick, you can't stay on the program that long. Most people don't. I remember I got into a big debate in Washington, D.C. with Robert Atkins. And I remember that day, Mary, when I was preparing the slides. Robert Atkins, by the way, died of heart disease. He says he fell on the ice in New York in April, but
he didn't say that.
Yeah, he did.
He was dead. He didn't say that.
Oh, his followers said, thank you. Anyway, his followers said that he had massive heart trouble, heart failure the year before. And I got a hold of his angiograms. He had terrible artery disease. But anyway, we got into this. I did this big debate. It was called the Great Nutrition Debate. And there are like about 500 news reporters there, cameras every place. And there are, some of the experts, including Robert Atkins, was there. It was broadcast all over the world.
You can probably still find it on YouTube.
Yeah, you can. The Great Nutrition Debate. And while I was preparing for the debate, I said, look, Mary, this is what I'm going to do. I said, I got these really good slides, and I know, that Robert Atkins will be on the panel. Actually, he was just sitting right next to me. I said, when he starts talking about how effective and easy to follow his diet is, I said, Mary, I'm going to say this. I'm going to say, okay, stand up and take off your coat. And I probably added the word fatty, didn't I? Okay, fatty, stand up. She wouldn't let me say that. I never said. It's one of the regrets I have in life, is I never really said what I wanted to say 22 years ago. Okay, chubby, stand up and take off your coat. He was about 60 pounds overweight. And Robert Lustig came up in our discussions yesterday. He's the guy that thinks sugar is the reason everybody's sick. Well, take a look at Robert Lustig. I mean, Google him, and if you get a full body picture of him, you can see how well his diet works. I wouldn't want to look like that, nor would I want to look like Robert Atkins. So anyway, we satisfy appetite by giving the body what it wants. It feels good. Yeah, you're hungry 4, 5, 6 hours later. They get rid of the appetite by making you sick. Now, if you can think of any other explanation to answer that question, I'd like to hear about it. And I will do a little bit more research about whether or not protein satisfies the appetite. But clearly what I took from that question, as when I finally figured out how to answer it, was, yeah, you're right. You get rid of your appetite more intensely. And as long as you can stay on the diet, it stays away. But the problem is you can't stick sick forever. And lots of people go off, including Robert Atkins. If his diet was so effective, why did he look like he was? Why did he have terrible arteries? Like I say, I had his angiograms. Why did he drop dead? As a relatively young man, I think he was 71. I got beat by 4 years, maybe. So I lived by 4 years. Anyway, Heather, go on.
On to questions.
You want questions?
Okay, this is a question from Eduardo. Do you know anything about night eating syndrome?
Say again.
Night eating syndrome.
Can you spell that for me?
No,
I feel like I'm in a spelling bee. Can you spell that one for me? Can you use it in a sentence?
Well, like eating at night, NIGHT.
Oh,
Well, no, I don't know. I've not heard about that, but boy, I eat at night. I came home from Craig's and the noodle dish didn't set with me very well. As soon as I got in, I made myself another dinner, which was about 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. Is that what night eating syndrome is?
well, maybe people just don't get satisfied at their evening meal, and so then they feel like they always have to eat before they go to bed.
Or maybe they think that meals consumed at night when it's dark cause more fatness, cause more accumulation of body fat.
About diets that tell people you can't eat after 6 o'clock at night.
Right, because when the moon's out, it causes you to gain more weight than if you ate when the sun was out.
Very fun.
All right. No, Heather, I can't answer the question. But if you could use it in a sentence, there you go.
Well, so it's okay to eat at night. We shouldn't feel badly because a lot of people are told, that it's not good to eat after dinner. And we tell people to eat when you're hungry, eat until you're
I don't care how many times of the day you eat. I don't care when you eat. And a lot of people are night shift work. And so their nights and days are mixed up. All I care about is what you eat. That's the factor. In fact, if you eat more times, you lose weight more effectively. You lose more weight if you're a grazer or a nibbler than you do if you're a gorger. So you've also been told, don't snack, don't gorge. In fact, it was one of the principles of the Adventist religion when I worked at Stanley Hospital is that that between meal eating was one of the rules you just didn't do. And I certainly was going to establish this.
These days when people talk about eating between meals, they're talking about all the junk that they eat in between meals, like chips and things like that, instead of healthy things.
It's what you eat, not how many times a day you eat,
or when
you eat. Yeah, that's the important thing to think about. Just make it as simple as you can. If you start to introducing rules that don't really count when it comes to the end result you're looking for, we dispense with a lot of those. We try and get down to what you need to get well, what you need to do to get off your drugs, or to avoid heart surgery, or other kinds of surgery. And that's what we want to do. We want to accomplish that. We want to make it so you can live long and live well. This is not a religion, folks. And one another way to put it is, I want to win the war, not every battle, especially the tiny battles. I just want to win the big one.
Thank you. John wants to know if this is the year that you're eating turkey on Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's a good one. Well, I didn't last Thanksgiving. True.
Yeah, true.
True. I didn't last time. I can't remember whether I ate the turkey at Thanksgiving before.
Yeah, it's been a long time.
It's been a long time. And of course, I have Chloe, which is our granddaughter, who's an absolutely strict vegan. I mean, she just if anything that had an animal touched her plate, she would throw the plate out and start over again. And this is she's 10 years old.
She's 10, yeah.
And we have had the Thanksgivings with her family for the last 5 years, but we're going to have Thanksgiving with your family this year. So Heather, you can report what I end up doing. My guess is, I don't need to prove anything anymore. What I was trying to do when I started doing that, and it's caused a lot of controversy, particularly among animal rights people. They get upset because I say I have a piece of time, about this big piece of turkey every other Thanksgiving. But see, what I thought is that if I presented it this way, people would understand that it isn't something like being a vegan for ethical reasons. It's a matter of being healthy. And if you happen to have a little piece of meat once in a while, like even once a week, probably it'd be okay. But once you get into eating this way, you start being aware of animal rights issues. And you start being aware of the fact that you just can't do it once. Once you start on that road, it's just a slippery slope. So, that's what I started doing. I started telling that story about 46 years ago. And I have no regrets, because I think the bulk of the people listening could understand, well, okay, I'm not going to become a vegan. This is what I'm going to do is I'm going to get healthy. And that's why we try and teach this as a starch-based diet. Most of your food has to be starch. It's easier if you make clear distinctions, like, I'm not going to eat any animal foods, or I'm not going to eat any free oils. And that's why we do set up rules to help you, because as I mentioned, just a little bit will get you into trouble. I've told the story to you many times. Both Mary and I we were tobacco addicts before 1972, which we were able to quit. And if I had, that's 50 years ago. I can remember that morning when I finally quit.
Well, and for some people, just a little bit of dairy will like really affect their psoriasis or their arthritis or any of the immune diseases.
Autoimmune disease, that's right. Yeah, well,
so just a little bit would not be good.
But you get the rest of the story. If I now 50 years not having any tobacco, if I had one cigarette tomorrow, it'd be 3 the next day and 2 packs by Thanksgiving. I'd be smoking 2 packs a day by the time I got together with you by Thanksgiving. Anyway,
Don't worry.
I can't imagine.
it's not going to happen. So my guess is I will not have any turkey at Thanksgiving.
Okay, thank you.
But of course, if I do, Heather is going to have to be, because she'll have to not eat any. And that'll be you too. That'll be 3 of us at the dinner table.
Not have turkey on the same year? Maybe we can bury it.
I don't know. I don't think that story's going anyplace.
I don't think so either.
All right, thanks. Good answer. Okay, next question from Karen. She heard that alpha lipoic acid is great for cancer. What are your opinions on that?
Alpha lipoic acid. It's actually alpha linolenic acid. That's omega-3 fats.
Well, you talked a lot about that yesterday.
Yes,
About oils and cancer.
Yeah, linolenic acid or linoleic acid is an omega-6, and alpha linolenic acid is your omega-3. So you've got omega-3, which people talk a lot about because the fish has been a big thing to advertise, and fish are loaded with omega-3 fats. The idea that omega-3s, and I went over this with quite a few slides yesterday when we talked about lipotoxicity, in other words, fat poisoning. And I showed you the research where, feeding omega-3 fats suppresses the immune system and actually cancers grow. In fact, one of the studies that I showed you in the slides yesterday, and any of you who took the class, you got the slides, or you get them on Monday, and you'll have the reference. You'll have the slide that I showed you. It was Kenneth Carroll's work. And it will show you, actually, it was the second slide after Kenneth Carroll's work. But anyway, it'll show you that in experiments done on rats, where they introduced cancer by feeding them a cancer-causing chemical, and then they put them on fish oil. What happened is they had 10 times as much metastases. And if you counted the volume of metastases compared to the rats that were on the low-fat diet, it was 1,000 times in volume. Those who fed the fish oil, which is the omega-3, which is the alpha linolenic acid, not alpha. Anyway.
Thank you.
The answer is not true. It's not true. But, that may be part of the pitch of the low carbers. The low carbers are out there trying to tell you that it's healthy to eat the low carb diet if you have cancer. This is a dangerous message. It's incorrect, because the foods that are fed by the low carb people who profess a low carb diet are the ones that give you cancer and promote cancer. I mean, this is a diet of bacon, butter, and brie. All you do is you stay away from things that prevent cancer, like potatoes and rice and corn. So, you've heard me talk so many times about all the evidence, worldwide evidence, which, by the way, I showed you in the lecture yesterday. The worldwide evidence where when you looked around the world, you found there's a direct correlation between breast cancer and total fat intake, particularly saturated fat intake, animal fat intake, but also vegetable fat intake. And then there's a whole bunch of laboratory experiments that show this. And there's a paper in, again, we showed it yesterday as part of the slides, in JAMA Oncology, where because the low carb people are so much talking about how people who have cancer need to be on their diet, there's actually a group of scientists who got together and decided, to compare, would it be better to eat a low carb diet versus a high carbohydrate diet? And their conclusion was, you need to eat a high carb plant-based diet. That's what the evidence says. And I don't know anybody who talks such nonsense except the low carbers, and I hope they get their day in court. Because if I was a cancer patient and I really believe their message, and I died sooner or whatever, things didn't work out so well. I wouldn't treat them kindly. Let's put it this way.
Thank you. Okay, next question's from someone that has IBS and has been following this program for a month now, eating very bland foods and really hasn't had any relief. Do you have any suggestions?
Well, IBS, irritable bowel syndrome, is a spectrum between constipation and diarrhea. You could have both, but it covers either of the extremes. So when somebody says they have irritable bowel syndrome, they could be talking about being very constipated, or they could be talking about having a lot of gas, the diarrhea, etc. You'd have to define better for me what your symptoms are for me to really give you a direction. If what you said was that you had, severe constipation, well, now we've corrected some of the problems. We've taken you off the dairy, which paralyzes the bowel wall. We've put a whole bunch of fiber. Remember, the fiber is only in plant foods. There's no fiber at all in eggs or turkey or beef, and it's only in plant foods. So you've got bulk, you've got dietary fiber, and the things that paralyze the gut and cause severe constipation, you've eliminated by going on our program. There's a whole other story out here. There's people who have problems with bile acids. And what happens is the bile acids irritate their large intestine. They get horrible diarrhea. Well, bile acids are made as a consequence of eating fats and oil. Okay, the liver makes them. And so just by cutting down the fats and oil in your diet, you decrease the production of bile acids, and the fiber also gets in there and complexes the bile acids, and you stop that diarrhea condition. I'm really surprised that you haven't gotten great relief. And so I think, the thing, if we were sitting across from each other, I think what I would do is I'd ask you, what are you really eating? And what kind of problems do you, what kind of symptoms do you have? Because it shouldn't be that way. You should have had your problems corrected by this time. It's a starch-based diet with the addition of fruits and vegetables. And that most of our people who do that, or almost everybody that I can think of, have a huge change in their bowel habits. That'd be another question I'd ask you. Has anything changed in the last month? Well, if nothing's changed with your bowels in the last month, then I suspect nothing's changed in your diet in the last month. Any of you who've been through dietary change of any kind, it's reflected in your bowel function, like immediately. So, there'd have to be a few more questions that I have answered before I give a more specific answer to that. Also, simplifying your diet, I think, would help a lot. Pick something you like potatoes or sweet potatoes or rice, and make that a big part of your diet. Don't put a lot of different foods in. The other thing is maybe you're complaining about irritable bowel syndrome related to gas. One of the criticisms that I'll accept on our program is that you'll make more bowel gas, okay? Because there are carbohydrates that we can't digest, particularly in beans, peas, and lentils. And the intestinal bacteria digest these carbohydrates, and they turn them into bowel gas. So, are we talking about that? And maybe what you need to do to get rid of the gas, which can cause a lot of discomfort and rumbling and so on, is you need to just give up the beans, peas, and lentils. You never have to eat one of these legumes. You don't need it for protein. You never have to eat it. So simplifying your diet be something else I'd ask you to do. So I know there's hope for you.
Great, thank you. This question is from Video 1000 Nights. If you have an unplanned deviation, like a meal with oil in it, is there anything that you can do to speed up the detoxification process?
This isn't the same person who just asked the question. No, you just have to go back to, you have to take the attitude that, you did something that's not what is better to do. And, it's not like you
just put it behind you and you go on and
you didn't go off your diet. Okay. The diet of a human being is starches, vegetables, and fruits. What you did is you took a deviation for one day, but you have to keep believing that what you're supposed to be eating, just like 99.99% of people who ever walk this earth have done, you need to eat a diet based on starch. Pick your favorite starches. And one of the things that we could get kind of joke about is that when people eat well and they have an oily meal, vegetable oils in particular, but animal fats, is because of what we just talked about, because oil, if you eat a fatty or oily meal, you make a lot of bile acids and you have diarrhea. And so there's something called McDougall's revenge. And, once you stop doing the things that cause McDougall's revenge, like having these indiscretions, then, everything will be okay. I'll straighten out. But, so something you mentioned just a minute ago, Mary, and that is there are some people who the consequences of having it just a little bit can be catastrophic. I remember one of my rheumatoid arthritis patients. This is a woman who couldn't take any of the immune suppressant drugs. And she, went on the program because she just wanted to get well. She was suffering terribly, as people with rheumatoid arthritis do. And all her joint pains went away. The swelling went away. She felt absolutely wonderful. And about 4 months after she started the diet, she came back to see me. I was at the Honolulu Medical Center where I worked for quite a while. And I walked in the room and she's sitting on my exam table with her knee exposed. And I could tell from right across the room that she was in big trouble. And I looked at her knees and they were hot, red, and swollen. And I said, Janet, what'd you do? She said, well, I really haven't done anything except 2 nights ago, I went out with my girlfriends and we went to a vegan Chinese restaurant. And she said, I had Chinese food. I said, I bet it was swimming in oil. And she says, yeah, it was. Anyway, so, a little bit of indiscretions for people who have these inflammatory arthritis can be, quite devastating. All right. So what do you do? Well, it takes about 4 to 7 days to clear the bowel of the food. So you shouldn't expect the joints to start getting better, for all the things to return until you can flush all of the bad stuff out of your intestinal tract, which could take 4 to 7 days to do. But that's all, and then everything goes back to normal and you feel good. And hopefully you learned your lesson, but if you haven't, it'll be there for you.
Great, thank you. This next question is from Gail, and she's wondering if you have any advice for someone with a stomach ulcer.
Well, yeah, I do. Let me, stomach ulcers used to be a really big problem, but they're not so much anymore because of triple therapy, which is a proton pump inhibitor plus 2 antibiotics. And this is as a result of a discovery, and the scientists who discovered this actually got the Nobel Prize. They discovered helicobacteria, H. pylori. Okay, and what they discovered was that it was H. pylori, this particular bacteria, that caused ulcers. And if you killed the bacteria in your stomach, and they do now, if you have an ulcer, what they're going to do is they're going to treat it with triple therapy, a proton pump inhibitor, and 2 antibiotics, and you'll get better. You'll kill the bacteria, but you only stay better as long as you're taking the antibiotic, the triple therapy. And then once you stop, the helicobacteria, the H. pylori, come back.
Well, not if you're eating a good diet.
Well, actually, they do come back, Mary, but they just aren't toxic. See, if you look at the infection rate of H. pylori worldwide, is you find that in underdeveloped countries, the infection rate is near 100%. In our country, in the United States, it's about 40% of the people are infected. But in other countries, even though they have almost ubiquitous infection, because they eat a starch-based diet, the bacteria don't cause all these negative things. You have to have in combination with catching these bacteria, you have to have in combination an unhealthy diet for these bacteria to become toxic. And you're right, I mean, the ultimate solution to ulcers, even though I would prescribe, if I saw somebody who had a definite stomach ulcer, I would prescribe triple therapy to them. A good grief, I'm a doctor. I want to give people the best advantage of everything and anything. And then I give them a big pitch about how if they don't want this to come back, then what you have to do is you have to change your diet. You got to put the good things in your stomach.
So even if you have the bacteria, if you eat healthy foods, the bacteria don't grow on the.
Well, they're not toxic to the mucosa of the stomach.
Okay.
They don't act that way if you eat a healthy diet. Well, you change the whole contents of the stomach when you change what you eat, not just in the foods you put in, but you change the way the stomach acts. This part of the stomach is to secrete acid. And the reason you have acid in your stomach is to digest the protein. And so we have a certain amount of acid in our stomach. If we eat high protein foods, then you're going to have more acid in the stomach. So you're going to be more of a setup for developing ulcers. And, we're not supposed to have a high content of acid in our stomach. It's really quite low. Whereas a kitty cat, whose diet is meat, they have about 7 times more concentration of acid in their stomach because they need it to digest what they're supposed to eat. So if you eat protein, we're particularly talking about poultry and fish and beef and pork, then you're going to make a lot of acid, which is going to, along with these bacteria, it's going to tear holes in your stomach. But I have to mention one other thing, and that is that calcium does it too. And so milk drinking is also a stimulus for a tremendous amount of acid secretion. And we could go on and talk about a couple other things. I'd just like to, Mary and I both started out working as surgical nurses. That's how I put myself through medical school. And when I met Mary, she was also working in an operating room. So I've been on thousands, and so is Mary, thousands of operations. And what we used to do for stomach ulcers is we used to do something called a vagotomy. What it was believed was that the reason you got ulcers is because, remember that?
Yeah.
You got ulcers because something going on in your mind, which stimulated the vagus nerve, which releases acid. And so we'd go in there, we usually go through the chest, and we'd find this vagus nerve running along the esophagus. We'd cut that little guy. This is a big thing. Or the other way we treat ulcers is we'd take and cut out part of the stomach. So tremendous advances like this triple therapy that I'm talking about. But, to really get the kind of results that people deserve is they have to be told that these H. pylori bacteria, Bacteria pylori, H. pylori, they do their nasty stuff only when the environment of the stomach is not right. It's high acid and whatever other things that happen when you eat animal foods. That's not what the stomach is designed for. It's designed for a low content of acid. But anyway, that's probably more than we wanted to hear tonight. Hey, we've been at this a long time, a half a century. We've been married for 50 years, and I told this story many times. Mary and I met in the operating room of Blodgett Hospital in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I was a medical student, and she was a surgical nurse working for the most famous orthopedic surgeon in the world. And I fell in love.
Took her a little bit longer, didn't it?
It took her a little longer. I'm still wondering whether she's reached that point someday. It was love at first, gentlemen, and she was wearing a mask. We all had masks on there. All I saw was her eyes, and this just happened.
Okay, great. The next question: how do you feel about intermittent fasting?
Well, it's a traditional thing. Right? People have done intermittent fasting. That means you don't eat at all for one day, and hopefully you go on water. A true fast, you go on water. You just don't switch to juices. But juice fast is not really a fast. You just are eating liquid food. So if you do fast for a day or two and so on, it's been incorporated in religions for forever. Almost all religions have a fasting component to them. So there must be some psychological or physical advantage to that. I haven't been able to figure out what it is. As far as long-term fasting, and one of my good friends, Alan Goldhammer, who I've been friends with for 35 years, runs the most successful fasting program, water fasting program in the world, called True North. And it's a place where you'll be well supervised, and they'll take you off all the food, just feed you water for a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of months. And people do really, really well as long as they follow the diet that they're taught when they come off the water fast, and they're taught the McDougall diet. They've been teaching that for 35 years at True North. The only difference is they take away the salt and sugar, so the food is pretty unpalatable. Well, let's just say it's more palatable. It's
bland.
Yeah, it is. But we want you to eat the food, so we allow a little bit of salt and sugar to it. So, in answer to your question, I've seen no real benefits in patients who've intermittently fasted because, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, or Friday they go on a fast. Monday they go back to cheeseburgers. What do you expect? The same thing with people who leave True North, is they do really well. When they're on the ultimate elimination diet, the lowest cholesterol, lowest fat, lowest protein, lowest everything diet. You just get water, and you do wonderful. I don't believe you do any better than if you change to what we recommend, which is a starch-based diet of fruits and vegetables. But it certainly it puts you in an ideal state to heal, and plus for an ideal state to learn. Ladies and gentlemen, after a week with no food, bread tastes like the best steak you ever had, and water tastes like the best glass of wine you ever drank. It's a great way to learn how to eat well. And after you've been on a fast for a few days, and you don't learn much in a day or maybe 2 days, but you'll learn a lot in a week or 2 weeks. It's an easy transition to our diet, to the McDougall diet. And like I say, that's what they've been teaching at True North for over 35 years. And they do it for a reason, because they want long-term success with people too.
Great, thank you. Next question from Anthony. How many times a day are we supposed to have a bowel movement?
Well, that varies. That varies with the person, and of course, people's diets vary. If you eat a lot of fibrous foods, and you eat a lot of beans, for example, are very heavy in fiber, then you're going to have larger and probably more frequent bowel movements. But the general thought about a good bowel movement, by the way, in let's see, the book I wrote on GI tract is
Dr. McDougall's Digestive.
Dr. McDougall's Digestive.
Trouble. Maybe it's because it's such a long title.
Well, it was in 2007. I don't know. I have other thoughts in my mind. I kind of want to tell you something. And in there, it's the only place I know where anybody's ever described what a bowel movement is like. Well, that's why I have you around to help me with this. It's
a whole newsletter on that, In Search of the Perfect Bowel Movement.
Yeah, well, it became part of this book.
Okay.
And what I do is I take a whole page and I describe to you what a perfect bowel movement is. And it can occur once a day, 3 times a day, every 2 or 3 days. It's not explosive. It's not watery. It's not painful. It's large and pretty much unformed. It's like a cow plop if you're eating the right kind of diet. And it shouldn't be a lot of straining. That's not involved in having a healthy bowel movement. Dude, just kind of passes, just like it's gone.
So there's not really a supposed to. How many times a day are you supposed to have a bowel movement?
No.
It's just supposed to happen naturally.
And people have been having for a long time. I think pretty much every animal does. But if you have these tubular bowel movements that are hard and difficult to pass, or what I describe is a fecal marble. Where you have all these little fecal marbles. That's not right. That's not supposed to be that way. And there's some really, really important work done on the effect of cow's milk on stools. Published in the New England Journal of Medicine in 1998. What they did is they looked at children who had constipation. The way you got into the studies, you had a bowel movement every 3 to 15 days with the use of a laxative. And these were young kids. And they did examinations on them. They did sigma examinations where you take a silver tube and stick it up their butt. And they did biopsies and looked at the bowel tissue under the microscope. Anyway, all they did was take the kids off the cow's milk. And 70% of them were completely relieved of their constipation. And about 8 months later, they did something that I don't think parents should have done, but they did it. They put the kids back on cow's milk because that's what the investigators asked them to do. And every single one of the kids developed severe constipation within a week. Now, when they examined the bowel, the specimens of the bowel under a microscope, they found a tremendous amount of inflammation. And so what the understanding is it's not just the lack of fiber in your food, it's that dairy proteins in particular interact with the bowel lining and cause an inflammatory reaction that paralyzes the bowel. This is a wonderful study. It's one that I refer to often, but if you just put it in the internet search, which is part of your homework tonight, I try and give you a little homework every time we get together, is if you put in your search engine, you put in cow's milk and constipation, you'll find that study and many, many other studies. This is something that every parent should know.
So this is another indication of just a small amount of indiscretion can really make a huge difference.
The kids were taken completely off the cow's milk. 70% of them were completely cured of their constipation. And like I say, the parents were asked to put the kids back on the milk and they got sick within a week.
Amazing. Next question. This is from G Girl. She's wondering if she needs 150 micrograms of iodine daily in addition to the B12 that we recommend.
No, I don't think so. And the reason is because goiter belts, which unless you live in Africa where there are still goiter belts, but goiter belts like it used to occur around the Great Lakes, which occurred because people ate within 25 miles of their house. All the food was growing, and so they in these particular areas, and there's still some areas in Africa, they would eat from deficient soils that didn't have iodine. Plants can grow without iodine, but people need it for their thyroid function. But we don't eat that way anymore. We go to the grocery store and we buy corn from Nebraska, apples from Washington, potatoes from Iowa, grown in different soils. So it never becomes a practical issue. You get plenty of iodine in your plant foods, and because you don't eat from iodine deficient soils. In Africa, the way they deal with this is they give an iodine mixture in oil as an injection. So they get long-term iodine for people who have this thyroid disease, which results in goiters, hypothyroidism, and so on. But no, I've never seen a problem of iodine deficiency ever in my practice. Well, can you take it just to be on the safe side? Yeah, probably. Now, I don't know of any particular problem of taking 150 micrograms of iodine a day. So there might be some. I'd look that up on the internet, see if there's any toxicity from taking iodine.
All right, thank you. Next question from Pete. His question's about the rice diet. He believes it's the perfect diet and can be followed by life, but is wondering why it's restricted in calories. Why restrict calorie intake? And why can't they just eat their 2,000 calories a day and not get the same results?
These are people with morbid obesity that Walter Kempfer put on calorie restrictions. But he also had the other problem. He took care of a lot of people who had heart failure, kidney failure, et cetera. And he would have to add extra calories in their case, as much as 500 grams of extra sugar, white sugar, 2,000 calories of extra white sugar. He added to some of the patients' programs. So what he was looking for is rapid weight loss in these people with morbid obesity. And if they restricted the amount of rice that they ate, it happened quicker. But, I don't take that approach, because when you restrict the amount of food that you eat, you're in misery. You're in the pain of hunger. And so one of the things that is clearly established is the recommendation that you eat as much as you want of the right foods. And eventually you'll end up at the trim body weight you want to be at. Plus, you're on a program that you'll stick with. You're not going to stick with a program that leaves you hungry all the time. Why do I know that you're going to end up with the personal appearance you're looking for? Is because if you look around the world, we can still see this. You see people who live on starch-based diet where nobody's overweight. And I'll give you a classic example, the Asian. Before 1980, 90% of the food from somebody in China was white rice. And there were no overweight people. And as a result, they had no type 2 diabetes before 1980. Now, of course, if you look at the Chinese population, you see lots of obese people, particularly the very wealthy or the middle class. Those that can afford to fly first class on the airplanes. Things have changed in the last 40 years, folks. So we don't, part of our program is not calorie restriction. And people who try and calorie restrict or eat a whole bunch of salads and as opposed to starch, I worry about them. I don't think they're going to be on something they want to do for the rest of their life.
Great, thank you.
Dr. McDougall's Digestive Tune-Up,
All right.
published in 2006. It's still a national bestseller. We get royalty checks on that book, don't we?
We do.
Well, on a rare occasion.
Yeah, but we just sort of we've met our quota as far as selling that book, but it's still an active book of sales. You can find it on Amazon. Dr. McDougall's Digestive Tune-Up. It's a good book.
You just had to prove that you remember the name of it.
Listen, after 50 years, we still compete all day long.
You guys are funny.
She usually wins.
Okay, we've got a couple minutes left. I thought I would end with one question. This is from Alina, who's new to the program and just reading the book. Mm-hmm. And I'd like you to sum up the program in just a few sentences.
You want me to summarize the program?
Yeah. How would you describe it? You're so good at it.
2 sentences. The McDougall diet is a starch-based diet with the addition of fruits and vegetables. That's the first sentence. The second sentence is the McDougall diet avoids all animal foods and free oils. 2 sentences. Starch-based with fruits and vegetables. It avoids all animal foods. Anything that's a secretion, which would be milk, that's a secretion. Or anything you cut off the body of an animal, whether it be their ears, or their tails, or their feet, or their butts, or eat the wings or tails, and you don't eat that stuff. Instead, you eat the particular food you were designed to eat, which is what 99.99% of the people who ever walk this earth have done. You base your diet on starch. This bizarre behavior of eating the Western diet's only been around about 150 years, except in the wealthy. It's been around for about 5,000 years. You can find the pharaohs, the priests, the queens, the kings in Egypt. They've been mummified, and we can examine their bodies, and we see gallbladder disease, and we see horrible atherosclerosis. And the kings and queens forever have been able to eat a lot of animal foods and the rich foods, and they've been sick for thousands of years, and that's why you get ill.
That's why they call them rich foods, because rich people could eat them.
Sounds good to me. Folks, you know this. You've seen the portraits of aristocrats from Europe. The old obese king sitting on his throne with his gout-infected foot. It's a classic picture. And his court standing around has all kinds of diseases, and they're sick. If you eat like an aristocrat, you get sick. If you eat like the people who built the pyramids, who built the castle, the farm workers, the workers who toiled building the pyramids, they lived on starch. Anyway, it's a lesson.
And they were healthy.
They were healthy, and it's an old story, Heather, and it's consistent, which is one of the things that I enjoy telling people is it's an old message. It's been told by many people, and Mary and I, and you get a chance to tell it the best we can, in hopes that people will make the change.
I want to show that once more.
One more.
Okay.
That's it. You need to make the change and keep working at it. But once you get it, I promise you, you're going to look back and say, why didn't I do this before? There's so much benefit. It's so easy. Anyway, it's fun Saturday night again.
Sunday night.
Sunday night.
Yeah,
Sunday night.
see why I keep her around.
You need her.
But
Okay, well, we've run out of time. It's 6:01. And I just want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. I did share a link in the chat for our Thanksgiving menu that we'll be enjoying on Thursday. And we won't see you this Sunday because we're going to be with family. So our next Sunday meetup will be December 4th.
Oh, good.
and remember, Thanksgiving is the biggest feast that people have all year long, or it's supposed to be. But actually, it's the healthiest meal that most people have all year long. They have lots of potatoes and dressing and vegetables and so on. So it's the healthiest meal they have. And it's supposed to be the biggest feast. And every meal after Thanksgiving is even a bigger feast with worse food. So if you decide you're going to go out and have a little bit of a fling on Thanksgiving and the rest of the year you follow the rules, you're going to be okay.
Absolutely. Okay, that was a great hour. Thanks, Mom and Dad, Dr. McDougall and Mary. Thanks, everybody. See you in a couple of weeks.
Very good. Thank you,
Okay.
Heather.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone.
Happy Thanksgiving.